I'll record. Welcome, everybody. We have a interesting topic, I think. If you look at my sheet that I gave, it says that I made a slight joke there. Chuppah under the hood. Going under the hood, of the car, but here I mean like there's something you're under. And actually, I brought these two psukim. Vayomer mi'at. This is from Root. V'tomer anochi Root amatecha uferasta kanfecha al amatcha ki goel ata. So this uferasta, this putting a blanket over me or putting something over me, is seen by some of the early commentators to mean to be a source for chuppah, putting something over like a cloth. And further, also in Bereshit, I brought another pasuk. I don't know if I sent that in the sources, actually. It says by Rivka, but tisa Rivka et eneha v'tereh et Yitzchak. And then a few words later, v'tikach et saif v'titkas. And she took a scarf and she covered herself. And there are those that also see this as a chuppah that she's doing. And actually, you could say, well, where are the brachot of the chuppah? So they say that the brachot that her family gave her before she left, those are the Sheva brachot. That's the source for Sheva brachot. This is very interesting that there is this source in this way in the Tanakh, and that it seems to be a kind of covering, a blanket. But we're going to go away from that idea. Wait, let me share my source.
Is it that it's a source from the Tanakh, or is it something that the Rabbanim later read into the Tanakh that may or may not really have been the initial intent?
A good question. It's a good question, but it could go either way. It could be that it really was. One of the sources that I bring, who is it? The Kashbetz, he understands it as a source, as an actual source. So we'll see. It could actually.
It'd be good if it's a source. In my mind, it's good if it's a source. All our sources are usually right. Gezeirat HaKatuv, certain drashot, to have a narrative source for something as nice as a chuppah, it's not bad. I wouldn't want to reject it. Not saying it's good enough, but I wouldn't want to reject it.
It's definitely not an asmachta. It's seeing an action in what they did. It's right there.
Wait a second. I think it sounds more so with the pasuk from Ruth than with Rivka. That's just my own reading of it. But like with Ruth, it definitely seems much more connected, rather than somebody who's covering herself up out of shyness or tzniut, or before she falls off her camel.
Right.
Definitely. Well, here's my source 9. No, source 9, no, source 8 here. I can make it a little bigger. Mashe porsin, snif. I don't know, it should be seif. I don't know. Snif al rosh chatan bekala b'shas habracha. Lefi shegam ze nikra knisa lechuppah. Ki chuppah lashon kisui. V'yesh omrim al shem v'tikach hatzaif v'tikas the Rivka. I mean, it's not a Gemara. It's the Tashbetz here. I think I'm not good at history, but he might be a Rishon. I don't know. Not sure. Yeah. Rabbi Landis is nodding. Okay. So also there's a very
it's Ben Duran. I mean, it's pretty early Rishon.
There's also a very
I
interesting.
have my list of Rishonim.
There's a very interesting Rashbam. I didn't give him my source. It's a very interesting Rashbam in Bereshit chapter 26, where this is really worth noting, this Rashbam. He says like this, Kol ha-mitzvot nikarot, which means like a sichliot, kagon, gezel, v'arayot, v'chimud, v'dinim, v'achnasat orchim. He brings a whole list. Kulam hayu nohagin kodem matan Torah. All these mitzvot were in practice before Matan Torah. Ele shenitchadshu v'nitparsu liYisrael v'kartu brit l'kayma. But they were, reinvigorated or re-established, and then a brit was made to actually do them. So the Torah, as you could say, well, Root is before Matan Torah, not Root, Rivka is before Matan Torah. But the Torah actually is sort of sanctifying behavior that was previously in vogue. I mean, not all behavior, just the behavior that it felt was good behavior. Okay. So let's just jump right in here. We have, so we're going to try to investigate what is chuppah, because we just now are saying, this source that I'm just bringing you is saying that chuppah is maybe a head covering. But let's see what the Rambam says. So, Sarah, you want to read?
Sure. Arusa asura levala midivrei sofrim kol zman shehi beveit avia. Habal arusato beveit chamav makinoto makat mardut. Va'afilu im kitcha bevia asur lo lava le'avia shnia beveit avia ad sheyavia ota letoch beito v'yityached ima yifarshen lo. V'yichud zeh hu nikra knisa lechupa v'hu nikra nisuin b'kol makom. Habal arusato l'shem nisuin achar shekitcha mishe'ya rabba kna'a. So
in summary, what is chuppah? What you just read?
Chuppah is bringing her into his house and sort of like designating her as his.
Right. Yafrishena lo. He says she is for me, but he brings her into his house.
And then has yichud with her there, right?
And has yichud, and he uses the word yichud. V'yit yachedima. He's alone with her. Okay, read the next halacha.
Kevan shenichnasa ha'arusa lechupa, harei zo muteret lavo alea v'chol eit sheyirtzeh, v'harei hi ishto gemura lechol davar. U'mi shenichnas lechupa nikret nesua, afal pisha lo nivala, v'hu shetiyeh reuya leveila. Aval im hayta nida, afal pisha nichnasa lechupa v'nityached ima, lo gamru hanisuin, v'harei hi ke'arusa adayin.
Right. So the yichud has to have a special quality about it, which is what?
The potential of sexual activity.
Potential of sexual activity, but it doesn't have to have sexual activity. In fact, probably wouldn't have sexual activity. But it has to be, right? He says, afal pisha lo nivala, even though there was no sexual activity, but it has to be possible to have sexual activity, and therefore, if she's a nida, doesn't work. So the Rambam is understanding, right? Yichud as the facilities for, what do you call it? The consummation of the marriage.
But who would know besides her, and I guess the arus / baal?
They would know. What do you mean? Nobody's tricking anybody here.
No, but it's not something that women usually publicize with anybody else around them.
Yeah, but the point is they have to. If the dinim of a nesuah would not be applicable yet until they had later yichud.
Isn't there an automatic chashash of like sexuality or sexual act happening when there's yichud? Like there's automatic chashash associated with yichud, and that's why yichud isn't.
Yeah, but again, we don't
in the
care.
first
We
place.
don't care if there's sexual activity or there isn't sexual activity. The Rambam clearly says he's just he. Remember what he said in the first part. He has to yafrishenolo. It's really he's showing that that this is his wife, and he's doing it by having yichud because you're not supposed to have yichud with a woman who's not your wife. This is something you're supposed to do only with your wife, and the yichud has to have a certain quality about it, that it's potentially sexual, but there's no hint that there's supposed to be any sex going on. I don't think the Rambam is just using that as a definition for what yichud, what's considered yichud. It has to have that potential, and that's and therefore, if she's nida, it's not going to work, which is very interesting. Which is what we call chuppah nida. It's a whole topic in halacha, chuppah nida. What do you do? Now, we're going to see that this is the opinion of the Rambam. It doesn't work, but according to other opinions, it's fine. But according to the Rambam, you'd have to have another yichud, right, with witnesses. Even if they, well, we're going to see an interesting question, which is like, what about a Kohen and a divorcee? They're also forbidden to have relations. Can you have yichud there? In other words, does the yichud work? Is that yichud ra'ui? Is that called, according to the Rambam, is that called yichud ra'ui l'bila? They're not allowed to be together.
But Kiddushin or Tovsin.
Exactly, Kiddushin or Tovsin. So how does the Rambam explain that? It's a kasha. How could it be tofas if you need yichud, and the yichud has to be rui l'bia, and nida is no worse? Is nida worse than nida maybe is worse than kohen and alma. Not alma.
The assumption of the Rambam that yichud is inherently sexual, that there's like inherent sexuality in the act of yichud.
I don't know what you mean by sexual. There's no sexual act necessarily. He clearly said that. He said.
Right. The reason why yichud is prohibited in the first place is because there is the risk of having sex. So therefore, like my understanding is that there is something inherently sexual about yichud. And like as soon as people are together sexual, you just assume, right? Unless she's nida, then you don't assume.
Right. Just like there isn't the problem of like if like people who like close relatives who wouldn't be having sex, that like it's not a
exactly
right? Like that maybe.
Yeah, you're allowed to have yichud with people who yichud does not necessarily mean you can have sexual relations, because you could also have yichud with close relatives who you would not normally have, which if you're forbidden to have relations, right? A mother and a son, they're allowed to have yichud. There's no chashash there. So it's not that yichud creates a chashash, I don't think. And if she's in nida, actually, we're going to one of the commentaries that I have here says that there's no chashash that he's going to have relations with her when she's in nida because he'll wait. Why should he do something wrong when he can have proper relations later? So I don't know exactly what you mean by sexual. Yeah, obviously the idea of yichud is to prevent illicit sexual relations, but here the Rambam explicitly said, even though you didn't have relations, it still works. Even though we know if they come out and say, no, of course we didn't have relations. That's not lo ba b'cheshbon. We never thought of such a thing. Still marriage. It's not because we presume something about that. It's just yichud. You have to have yichud.
But isn't that the whole point of HaEzer yichud? That there is that assumption that they might has to be enough for them to potentially engage in sexual intercourse, and there's the chashash associated with yichud.
Wait, isn't that exact? Why? What's the problem then?
There's no problem. I'm just trying to understand the Rambam. Like, is yichud associated with that perception that they potentially have sex, or is yichud just stay in the room together, no one cares? It's just yichud. Is there something else associated with the concept of yichud, or is it just yichud levad?
Well, I think it's multiple aspects. I think that what we're getting at is this idea that on the one hand, part of what we're saying is just that actually part of the act of what constitutes marriage is this sort of indication of you're bringing her into your house, you're together, that like you're actually experiencing what it's like to be together as man and wife, whatever. And that like, that's a big part of like creating marriage, is like having that feeling of like, we're in a home together, we're alone together in this home that is ours, or whatever his.
Exactly.
And the yichud is like part of that, right? The fact that like we're alone, and if we wanted to could have sex, is an aspect of that. I think it's like saying that like that's an important aspect of what that feels like to like be together in a home as man and wife, but that it's like not the exclusive like sexual component of yichud isn't like the only thing happening there.
Right, exactly. And,
So how do
in
you
fact,
explain the case of Nida? Because he said that
Again, because I'm saying it's a
Nida,
component.
like they're together,
And because it's an important
togetherness.
component, it's just not the
because
only
you feel
thing.
like you shouldn't be there. You
No,
shouldn't
but I
really
think
be there.
experiencing the togetherness, but nevertheless, like it brings her.
No,
to
because
the
when
house.
she's in Nida, there's still these barriers between you. You're not able to like exist as you normally would, and you're like fully
Right, so the sexual
interactive.
aspect of it is non-existent. Therefore, yichud
No,
has
again,
something there
no,
to
So
say.
this is what I'm saying, is that the sexual aspect is part of it. It's just not the like exclusive determining thing, right? I feel like no one's disagreeing that the sexual aspect or the potential sexual aspect is a part of this larger thing. But we're saying that like, yeah, like part of what it feels like to like finally be in your home together and you're alone is like the fact of like, wow, if we wanted to, we could have sex. And that's what we do as man and wife. And we hang out and we sleep in the bed together and we eat meals together. And if you can't do all those things while she's in Nida, you're not really experiencing what it's like to be fully like living together and married. And so that's a part of it. That's just like not the only part of it.
But I agree with you 100%, Lexi. That is, it's creating, it's doing an action which is symbolic of marriage. But the Rambam does not include. But the interesting thing is, unlike what the Aruch HaShulchan mentions, that sitting together, eating together is also a thing that husband and his wives do. So therefore, that's also a kind of chuppah, just eating together. But the Rambam doesn't say that. So it's interesting, right? He doesn't say that. He just seems to be focused on this yichud as the only way of doing it, and like we're saying, you don't have to actually have relations, but there has to be. That's, in other words, the definition almost of marriage is that you have relations together. That's what married people do, and so you have to. So that's like the paradigm of a marriage. And so therefore you have to create a circumstance where that paradigm could theoretically occur.
I think Sarah had something to say.
Yeah, I mean, two things. One is just maybe some of the eating together is actually implied in the like setting her aside as his, to the extent that like he's now responsible for feeding her and all of that other stuff. So maybe that's sort of already encapsulated, but yeah, it seems like there are three components of chuppah here as he describes them, and only one of them is yichud. And that
what are the three components?
Right, you have to bring the yichud has to be in his house, not somewhere else.
Right.
Actual yichud, and this sort of like designating her as
right.
His and not someone else.
I understand the designating part as like, that's what, by doing those two things, that's called designating her. I don't think there's a separate act of designating her.
There's not a sense that like, okay, if she were like in the Znut case, she could easily come into his house and right and have sex with him.
You're right. No,
you're
right. I saw an explanation in the Rambam where he said, if it's just temporary, if you're just bringing it to your house and having temporary yichud and you're not intending to be a permanent new part of your house, then it's not chuppah.
Right. And so maybe that's like sort of bringing her into his house. That's the same thing. But I don't know. It seems like there's a difference between. So
you're right. Maybe that
is an exclusive relationship or it's not. And like at the end of it, I'm expecting that you're gonna go like.
So I agree. All right.
We also get both extremes that are explained. Like there's I also forget which source this was. I forget if it was one of the ones here, or one of the ones in the Torah Shulchan Aruch, but where it says, like if he like brings her in, has sex with her, and then she like leaves like half an hour later, that's like not chuppah.
Exactly. That's what I was referring to.
And then we also say, I think it's the Aruch HaShulchan, who was like, also if he like brings her into his home and then they like spend no time together, or in like he brings her into his home and then like drops her off in the foyer and then like goes somewhere else, that's also not
Right.
like the thing, because that's not what this is about.
Right. They have to be making house together. Like children make house, they have to be. Rabbi Landis.
Okay, I'm not segueing off of children making house, but it's also, what could happen, or what should happen. When I was much younger, I went to a number of weddings of chavrutas that I had from North Africa, and the minhag was to consummate the relationship in yichud. While the Ashkenazim are spending time before coming to the dinner by taking pictures, they were actually consummating. And I'll just say it right now. And there was an issue in some communities where they certainly delayed, Apia Rambam, delayed the weddings because of Nida, because the notion of, and I went to, because like Maisa Shahaya, but I several weddings in which the issue of coming out with the sheet in which they slept in and dancing with the sheet. The women danced with the sheet. The sheet was stained. The sheet was stained with blood. These were young women having that. So the Rambam was understood not just as a nice, let's make a house and make a family. Like, okay, no, let's finish up the marriage.
You attended weddings where
it's proven
Do you
not
have
to
any
be
sources for that? Because,
not to be popular in the Ashkenazi direction. There was an old Rebbitzin who I once talked to about a long time ago, and she was a Talmidah Chachama in the time in which people worked. And I said, how come the Ashkenazim never picked it up? And she said, no one wants their hair mussed for later on in the wedding. But in any event,
For the pictures.
She said it was for pictures. She said it with a smile. But it's not just descriptive or evocative. It could for many took it as prescriptive. That's all I want to add to that.
I mean, it's no longer the minhag, because I'm in a North African community, like Tunisian, Moroccan, Algerian. That's kind of my vibe, and no one does that. There's not even a chashash that anything's happening in the Cheder Yichud. And actually, as a matter of fact, many Sephardim don't do Cheder Yichud at all.
There in Montreal. That's all I can say.
It's very interesting, Rabbi Landis. I never heard that.
Okay.
Rabbi Landis, the description of the bringing the sheet out, and that's something that you attended weddings like that?
I saw. Look, we're all talking. We're all in this parsha together. In that time, there were also somebody in the back, a woman who had a chicken in case they needed blood. Not joking. There was somebody with a chalf and there was a chicken in case they needed blood for the sheep. I saw it with my own eyes. Why should I?
You saw the chicken?
I didn't see the chicken situation. I saw the chicken, but it was a live chicken. They didn't need it. Okay.
All right. Do you know what their ethnicity was? Because I'm really curious to actually look into the halacha. Were they Moroccan, were Tunisian, were they Algerian?
I knew they were North Africans. So I can say it was
because, to be fully honest, I did hear that from some Tunisian sources, but apparently it's not done anymore. Definitely not the dancing, but I would be really curious to
I wasn't advocating the return. I'm just talking about
how they understood the Rambam.
Listen, at that wedding, there were the grandfather was sitting there with the mother of with the grandmother, and there was his wife, the grandmother of the Kala, but also his other wife. I mean, I'm going back to what year would this be? This would be 1967. And so the abolition of polygamous marriage had taken place, except the only term I can use is grandfathered in, except those who were already married in a polygamous relationship was continued. No one had a divorce in that point. So you really had old minhagim being kept because you had the old social structure that was there before everyone got modernized.
But the Rambam, but you don't think that the Rambam is advocating that, right? The
I
Rambam
don't
is
see that. No, I don't see that. But I think they understood the Rambam in that way.
well, but I think it's wrong. I think that because it's like I says here, afal pi shelo nivala. In other words, there's no need.
It's
See, that's a
easy
bit
for me.
right?
It's easy for me to agree with you.
He
I
doesn't
feel the
say
same
that.
way. I could push back on what you say only because I think that's what they were doing
Yeah, all right.
in terms of their Havana.
The Rambam never says you should do anything. He just says you have to bring her into a heter yichud. That's
Mhm.
fit for beila,
Right.
and that's it.
Okay.
Okay, so that's the shita of the Rambam, but that's not the only shita. Well, let's look at this Ran. Everybody quotes this Ran in the Beit Yosef, and everybody quotes him in the Shulchan Aruch. Also, the Nosek Gelim quoted this Ran. So let's look at this Ran. This Ran starts off. I just quoted a small part of this Gemara here. The ficha chala, if the woman is sick, or no, chala hu, he is sick. Oh, she chaltahi, or that she is sick. Oh, she pirsa nida, or that she had nida. Eino male la mizonot. You don't give her the mizonot. Now, what that means is that she's still considered as if she's just a arusa and not nisua. If she's nisua and then you get divorced, because if you divorce her at that point, you don't have to give her mizonot, because she's not actually nisua, because she's pure sanida. Well, that sort of fits nicely to the Rambam, actually, doesn't it? It seems like it goes like the Rambam. So, because like if there's anida, then you can't give her, then you don't give her mizonot. Okay, so here, Yavni, you want to read this?
Sure. או שפרסה נידה. איכא דא' לה מהכה דחופה היינו ייחוד. איכא דא' לה מהכה דחופה היינו ייחוד. ולפיכך, כשפרסה נידה ולא בעל, אסורה להתייחד, כדאמרינן לקמן, דהוא ישן בין האנשים, ואשתו ישנה בין הנשים, ולאו בת חופה היא. ומשום הכי, אינו מעלה לה מזונות, דאם איתה דחופה לאו, אינו מעלה לה מזונות, דאם איתה דחופה לאו היינו ייחוד, למה אינו מעלה לה מזונות? Sorry.
That's just continuation of the question.
והחזיה לנישואין, לפי זה אין מכניסין את הכלה לחופה עד שתטהר. Should I translate or?
Yeah, or say in your own words.
So we're saying that because we're learning that chuppah, what is the chuppah is yichud, because we're saying that if she is acknowledged as nida, then the chuppah doesn't give her the rights. Then the chuppah doesn't
take place. Then the
chuppah doesn't take place, right? Or whatever you might, yeah.
It doesn't have any tokef. It doesn't have any substance to it.
Right. Specifically in terms of right. It doesn't change.
That's the expression lav bat chupahi. Right. She's not shayach. She's not. It's not. She's not a participant in a chuppah, a capable participant in a chuppah.
Right. And that's why he doesn't provide her with food. And otherwise, if
chuppah wasn't
yichud, then chuppah would be separate, and it wouldn't matter that she was in nida. And
chuppah was something else, like putting a blanket over your head or something. So then, like, why wouldn't you get mazonos?
Right. Exactly. Okay, should I go
Okay.
on?
Yeah, go on. Yeah. That's the main point, first of all.
Oh,
That's the
and
main
this,
proof. But
but
that's
they cited a
remember,
source that I was a little confused about. They said it in Gemara that says that if she's, I don't know, it made it sound like yichud is not allowed for someone in nida, which I didn't know.
Yeah, that
Is
could
that
be true.
specifically for
For
newlyweds,
a
or is
woman
there
before
actually a
you're
rule that if you're
a woman before, that's one of the other problems of nisuin yichud, is that a woman that you're if you marry a woman and she's in nida, then you're not allowed to have yichud with her actually. Until you're allowed to have yichud with your wife when she's in nida after you've had sexual relations, because they call something, it's called pat basal, that a person he's already regular to his wife, so he doesn't mind waiting. But if he's never been with his wife, then we don't trust him. In fact, therefore, if you do yichud, if the kala is a nida and you want to do yichud anyway, then you need to have one or two, some say, edim in the cheder yichud with the chatan and kala to permit it. In other words, to undo the yichud nature of the yichud.
right?
Just let other people think that they had it, just to create an illusion that there was yichud.
The reasoning about what makes one used to is interesting. What being used to the other person means about yichud is interesting based on what we said earlier about one of the ways we understood the libo gasba in the case of people who have been divorced, right? If they've been divorced, right? The statement was if they've been divorced from marriage where they are used to sex, then we expect them to be more likely to have sex. That was one way we understood that.
Yeah, but only in a permitted circuit, only when she's not needed. Only in when she's a
fine, no, but it's just a different reasoning about whether being used to having sex with someone
it is. You're right.
More likely to have sex or less likely to have sex.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. You want to say question?
Yeah, quick question. The Rambam seems to be a tad different from the Ran, because the Rambam seems to be saying that you could actually have yichud with a woman that's nida, right? So at the end of halacha bet, he said, "Haval ma'itani da afal pi shekinsa lechupa v'intiyached ima lo gamra nisu." So the Rambam seems to be implying that you are allowed to be mitiyached.
I don't read the Rambam that way. I would not read the Rambam that way. He just
it wouldn't bring the case if it was saying.
I mean, you're right. He did not say it is forbidden to have yichud, but he also didn't say it's permitted to have yichud. He just said, if you did have yichud, it doesn't count. He didn't say whether it's permitted or forbidden. I don't think you can drag that out of his words.
Right, but I'm saying per the Ran, even if they have yichud, if they were to have yichud, yes, it would be an HaEzer, but it would work, right?
I don't understand. They both agree that it wouldn't work.
I don't think so,
The
because
Rambam is saying that
lav bat chupa, which means that it doesn't, nothing happens. It doesn't.
Yeah.
Right. So
whereas, right. So that seems like a different.
I don't understand. I understand them as saying the same thing. That if they have yichud together when she's in nida, it doesn't do anything.
I understood it a tad differently, right? From the Rambam, even if they have yichud together, it doesn't work because they don't have the sexual potential. However, from the Ran, it's if they were to actually have yichud together, which they're not allowed to halachically, it would work.
Why? Where do you see that?
They are allowed to have yichud halachically.
No, we're seeing that.
No, if she's a nida, they can't.
She's a nida initially.
That's what this Gemara is.
If she's a nida and they never had relations, then she's not supposed to have yichud.
Right, but what do
that's not relevant here.
To have it wouldn't work.
It's not relevant. I don't understand where you're getting this from the Ran. I don't see what words are you quoting.
But it's not saying otherwise. It seems to be saying that the main aspect of chuppah is yichud, right? However, in the case of a nida, they can't really have yichud, therefore it doesn't work. However, if they were to have yichud, it would work.
No. But exactly like Sarah said, lav bat chuppah. She is not in the category of people for whom chuppah is an effective agent. She is not in that category. Therefore, chuppah is meaningless for her. She's lav bat chuppah. She is not. Chuppah does not appertain to her.
Specifically because it is yichud.
It's a non-existent entity because chuppah must be yichud, and yichud cannot occur and therefore she is not shaykh to the category of chuppah.
Right, but let's push a little forward. Let's say they didn't know and they had yichud together.
Doesn't matter. She's not in the category. That's why I'm using that word. She's not in the category of potential chuppah participants. So even if she jumps
exactly
in,
the proper. No, you have to emphasize. You're right. I mean, you have to emphasize that. Whenever we say bat or ben, it means a person who can enter that category, and that's what you're saying. It's absolutely correct.
Can I
a
ask a
bar
question
mitzvah, a bar mitzvah boy is a person who is in the category of people who can do mitzvah. So she's a bat chuppah. She's not a bat chuppah. I mean, she's not in the category of people who can do who can be in a chuppah, even if she thinks she's doing it. If a guy says kiddush in a sukkah, he's not saying kiddush. He's not in the category of people that can say kiddush.
Can I ask a question that maybe is obvious to the rest of you, but I'm thinking about it? Are we saying that if she, let's say she gets her period before the chuppah, then we say, no, she's not going under the chuppah. She's not suitable to be under the chuppah. But let's say in scenario number 2, she goes, she does not have her period. She goes under the chuppah, and then that afternoon later, she gets her period, and then it's whether it's yichud or the wedding night, it's the time for the two of them to be together. Are we now saying that the chuppah was not, is that what the love is? It's not, it didn't have full effect for her until there's consummation. Because to me, it's 2 fact scenarios.
Yeah, wait. You got to clarify something. We're in the world where chuppah is not the 4 sticks with a blanket on top of it. We're in the world where chuppah is the yichud. So there's not like she was under a chuppah and then she had yichud. There's only one thing. There's just yichud. So your question isn't really shaykh here.
Right.
Nowadays, we do chuppah 7 different ways. At a normal wedding, we do a chuppah in 7 different ways. We do a chuppah so many times that, maybe that's why the woman goes around the man 7 times, to say, I did chuppah 7 times. We do every possible thing you could think of that could maybe be chuppah, we try to do. But we're talking now in the pure legal conception that the Rambam and that the Ran here is presenting, that chuppah actually is nothing that we do. It's only the cheder yichud. Everything else is not a chuppah. So we're only asking if she has blood before she goes into the cheder yichud, then what's the status of that cheder yichud? Is it count as a chuppah or not? And it does. And we're saying it does. We're saying it seems like it doesn't count. If there was another chuppah before that, then that would be the chuppah. Then that would be a chuppah. But we're not talking about. We're talking about just as though a woman would only have this one chuppah of yichud.
There's only one fact scenario. Okay, thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Right, exactly. We're triple vaccinated. We're 7 times vaccinating our marriages nowadays.
Just to make sure I understand, yichud for the Rambam means yichud plus sexual potential. That's what it is, and similarly to the Ran.
Yeah. Although, wait, before you say it's the Ran, 100%, but just I want to go forward a little bit and say this is Ikad the Yal. There are those that learn. The Ran has not endorsed this opinion. So far, he just presenting a limud that he has heard.
This may be going too far outside what we're talking about and into question of contemporary halakha l'maaseh, which we're not really dealing with. But how do we deal with the if you're not allowed to have yichud in a state of nida, then how do people who plan modern weddings who do a cheder yichud, how do they do that?
Well, so usually the woman takes the fertility pill to control, just for the purpose of controlling her nida.
Really?
Yeah, so that she won't be nida.
I mean, and we do have chupat nida. We have things that indicate nuances, very nuanced, that indicate that it's a chupat nida. And in many religious communities, she sleeps that night with a sleepover of a 7-year-old niece who sleeps with her in the bed. Doesn't have to be 7 years old, but yeah.
I don't know if I told you this. I was once such.
You were not a 7-year-old niece.
No, but I was at a wedding of the sister of a very good friend of mine, and she was Anita, and they asked me to sit in the Cheder Yichud with them, which was a very uncomfortable position to be in. The three of us were in there waiting 8 minutes till we could go out.
Wait, why?
Rav Nachum, how old were you?
Oh no, I was my mid-20s. No, they didn't seem to mind that I would know. Well, the point is, yeah, whatever.
And then the purpose of the Cheder Yichud is just to make it look like other weddings? Like there's no...
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
Yeah, and so the whole 200 people don't have to know about it.
And right,
It
it's
depends
you're the
also if you're
yeah.
Ashkenazi. Sfardim don't have, we're gonna do some practical stuff at some point. Sfardim don't have a Cheder Yichud.
Well, the funny thing is that she
Their
was,
Cheder Yichud is going home at night. They're going to the hotel or wherever they're going to be. They don't have that Cheder Yichud Zaman. That's Ashkenazi. You
Right.
have Sfardim you talk to about this, they have no idea what you're talking about.
Can you repeat the 7-year-old niece?
7-year-old niece. In order to
Once
make
in a while?
sure that the husband and wife don't have relations, there's a sleepover of a young innocent
well,
who
I mean, you don't
sleeps
have to-
over.
that's what we
there.
read here.
Yeah.
Dehu yoshen bein anashim v'ishto yoshena bein anashim.
I know, but so the akula on that is that she doesn't have to go sleep with the home with her sisters or mother-in-law. She can have a niece over and they can still be in that, whatever. That's the cool.
But I'm just, yeah, right, exactly. But I'm just pointing out that that's what that meant.
Right, it's there already. Yeah.
Sorry,
All
so
right.
while we're on practical questions, like a couple months ago, a friend of mine got married, very tiny little guy. And basically during the wedding, they spun him around. He kind of flew out and like ended up in the hospital at night. So like his wedding, Sephardi wedding, that so did have Cheder Yichud. So technically speaking, they weren't married until like a couple of days later.
The Rambam is just one opinion. Don't get too excited about
Yeah.
it. He's a very major opinion. He is perhaps the most major opinion, but there are other opinions. So no, you don't have. So she would, if they would get divorced, he would be chayiv in his own. I mean, that's all it means. That's the only. What other nafkaminas are there? Is she? Anyway, they did kiddushin. Anyway, let's go
I'm
on.
sorry, Nachum, I'm confused about that. Why is it only in the case of divorce that he's chayav mizonot and not like right away from the moment of the actual legitimate?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he's also just chayav to provide her mizonot when they're married.
Yeah, fine. Yes, also true. Yes.
Okay.
Sorry, I was just speaking in what occurred to me. Yavni, we'll continue reading.
והרב בעל העיטור הוסיף ואמר שאין מכניסין אותה לחופה עד שיכתוב כתובה, שקודם לכן אסורה לבעלה. וכן...
So this is kind of a side point.
Side point,
The
yeah.
Bala Itur just says you have to write the chuppah before.
Write the ketubah.
Sorry, you have to write the ketubah before the chuppah.
Yeah,
Because otherwise it would be asur for him to be with his wife because of this Gemara that we talked about a few times, which is kala below bracha or below ketubah is asur kanida. By the way, this Ashkenazim write the ketubah before the kiddushin. The Sephardim generally write the ketubah after the kiddushin, but before the Sheva brachas.
You say right
Under the chuppah in general. But either way, it's before the nisuin. Like the Balit. All right, go ahead.
וכן דעת הרב רבינו משה בר מימון זיכרונו לברכה בפרק 10 מהלכות אישות, והוודאי לא נהרה מדאמרינן לקמן רבי עמי שרי למבעל בתחילת שבת. אמרו לרבנן, והלא הכתיבה כתובה. אמר להו, התפסוה מיטלטלי.
So explain this Gemara if you've read it. If you need help, I can help.
Sure. Rabbi Ami says, permits the consummation of marriage to happen on Shabbat.
And what's the problem with having consummation of marriage on Shabbat?
Well, what the rabbis say is the problem with it is that it involves the writing of a ketubah. And you can't write on Shabbat, no?
No. That's, well, there's another problem.
Oh, I mean, there's another problem but what the problem is if that creates the marriage, then it's like an act of kinyan. That's the
also,
and there's also the like talking about like with the betula, there's like the aspect.
That's the key point I was going for, because that's what it means b'techila. Shari the miv'al b'techila b'Shabbat. In other words, the first time you have marital relations could be on Shabbat.
Right.
In such a case, you would make a chabura. You would make a wound in her flesh, and you're not allowed to make a chabura on Shabbat. So he would permit a chabura in such a circumstance. And then on that, the rabbi said
that. So then I mean, but he needs to write her ketubah before doing it.
Then when is he going to write her the ketubah?
When is he going to write the ketubah?
In other words, he should have written if he wrote the ketubah on Thursday, or then he should have had relations with her on Thursday. What's why? Or how he can't, in other words, essentially the wedding is occurring right now on Shabbat, but he has to write her a ketubah right now, and he didn't write her the ketubah, so how can he be with her? Forget about the chabura. I got another problem for you, Rav Ami. You got to write a ketubah on Shabbat. You can't write a ketubah on Shabbat.
Right. Okay. And
so Arabi answers that.
I mean, she takes his things as collateral instead of the ketubah.
So he holds that you don't have to have it written. You can just give her as collateral some items. So it fasul the she grabs some of his valuable items,
his
and
staff,
then
his cord, his signet,
like Tamar, and then he'll give it back. He'll get it back when he writes her the ketubah. And even though there's no ketubah actually written, it's as if he has a ketubah.
Yeah, the cord is like a credit card, car keys, bank account number.
Well, all those things are those are not good things, because I can cancel my credit card. I can call the police if you have my car.
Right,
it's got to be my diamond rings.
Okay.
Anyway, so go on.
ובוודאי ביום רביעי כנסה דלא, anyway, right. ובוודאי ביום רביעי and so this the Ran is bringing to show that in fact you don't need a ketubah before the chuppah.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. This is the Ran's defense here, or he's saying this is going to be his proof, I think, ultimately against this opinion that yichud is required. We're really still on that object, I think.
I think we're still in the parenthetical about the ketubah, but maybe not.
Yeah,
anyway.
Fine, right. We're in the parenthetical about the ketubah. You're right. But so bivadai b'yom revi'i kansa. What does he mean by that?
And for sure, on Wednesday, he brought her into his house.
He had the wedding on Wednesday. Yeah.
He had the wedding on Wednesday, right?
Why?
Because Rabbanan tiknu that weddings should happen on Wednesday.
Yeah. For virgins. This is the Gemara in Ketubah. The virgins have to be married on Wednesday. We don't follow this nowadays, but this was a takana then.
Oh right, okay.
Because they have to have time to go to the Beis Din.
Right.
And
so
the Beis Din only is on Thursday.
Right. So this question is really specifically about the sex. The wedding already happened on Wednesday. And if we're asking the question about writing the ketubah on Shabbat before the consummation, then surely that means that we've allowed the wedding to take place without the ketubah.
Right. He's saying she certainly had a wedding on Wednesday, and there must not have been a ketubah because otherwise the Gemara, why is the Gemara asking, where is the ketubah? Just say, of course, he wrote it 2 days ago at the wedding. So you see that you can have a wedding without yet writing the ketubah. The ketubah is only when to permit marital relations. And therefore you don't have to do like the Bala Iter says, writing the ketubah before the wedding. Okay, but we're still not done.
וכן בדין שלא מצינו שתהא אסורה להתייחד בלא כתובה. And we don't see anywhere that it says that you're not allowed to do yichud or marriage without the ketubah. ותמא דמילתא משום דאיסורא דביעה בלא כתובה מדרבנן בעלמא, מדרבנן בעלמא הוא, ועוד שהיא לא תשמע לו מפני שהיא יודעת שהיא קלה בעיניו להוציאה, ועוד דלא מתאסרה אלא משום דלא סמכה דעתה, שהרי מתנאי בית דין יש לה. So, and further, and so then the reason why we do allow marriage without ketubah is because while we do have a concept that you shouldn't have bi'ah without it, well, we do say that you shouldn't have a bi'ah without a ketubah, that's only midrabanan. So we're not going to make it even more stringent by requiring it before the chuppah. And furthermore, we don't expect it to be really a problem because she's not likely to accept the chuppah without a ketubah. It'll
no, I don't think that's what it means.
No, okay.
I think what it means, well, I don't know, maybe you're right. What did you mean by that? Shehi lo tishma lo. She's not going to listen to him. Listen to him about what?
Listen to him about the bi'ah?
That's what I think. He won't be able to convince her to have relations with him because she knows that she didn't get a ketubah and she therefore will be kal beinav. He'll be easy for him to divorce her because he won't have to give her any money.
Right.
And so she'll hold back. And therefore we don't have an isser of yichud because we trust her. Because she's going to be careful because she knows that she doesn't have her ketubah yet. So therefore there's no isser of yichud in a case where there's no ketubah. Even though there's no ketubah, even though we should really write a ketubah. So he says, you might think, write a ketubah so that you can have yichud. And he's saying, no, you don't need to write a ketubah. You can have yichud anyway, because there's no problem with yichud when she didn't have a ketubah because she knows that she's kala beinav, the hotziyah, to divorce.
Right, and that sense of being kala beinav is based on the fact that she's not totally confident in the fact that she should have the ketubah anyway, based on Tnei Beit Din. That's the rest of it.
Oh yeah, maybe. Rabbi Lynch wants to say something.
Yeah, no, I was going to comment. This is before the time that we have an assumption that she received a ketubah, and even if she can't find the ketubah, the standard ketubah would apply to her. Here, we're at a period in which if she doesn't have that document, she doesn't have anything. Later on, it was really kind of part of the takonos for Rabbeinu Gershom, is that all women get a ketubah, and therefore she should have the ketubah. But if she doesn't have the ketubah, we rely on the fact that all women get a ketubah. That was part of what he did. So that's like but this is before it. But that answered the question, I think. Yeah.
Well,
partially.
Yeah. Well, yeah, what's the next part? What is the next part of the Gemara? Thank you.
Ask a question first. This argument is it's concerning. Like it came up, I think, last week, that there's a presumption that women know their legal rights and that they would be able to make these kinds of arguments under these kinds of circumstances. Seems to me to be very strange.
Yeah, it's very interesting. It seems to me, from reading all of these things and what we talked about last week or 2 weeks ago, it seems to me that there's an assumption that women may not know much about halakha, the intricacies of halakha, but they do seem to know very well everything about marriage. They do seem to know that you need witnesses, you need a pruta, that you need ketubah, because that's, hurts them. That's their most sensitive topic.
It's like the Achron Beyonce, put a ring on it, Certain
But
things
even in our
are,
case,
certain things are like, no.
we're not clear about whether he has in fact put the ring on or not. We've been kind of
No,
arguing.
I didn't. I meant the ketubah here. I mean, every woman has always been told by her aunts, make sure you got the ketubah.
Oh, yes, but in this case, if we can't determine what has actually happened under the chuppah, how would the woman herself be able to determine whether there has been really marriage?
No,
Yeah.
what do you mean? What do you mean we can't determine what's happened under the chuppah? We're
No,
determining
there's a question of whether it actually requires the bia, whether it doesn't require the bia, how much can she stand in her place and legitimately fend off his advances if he says no, but we are married, and she says no, but we're not married. But it
No,
seems
but that's not the point. She knows they're married, but she's not. She knows she knows that he will easily divorce her, because the whole concept of the whole concept of what's it called, of ketubah. The whole concept of ketubah is to prevent the husband from easily divorcing his wife. And so if that's a true reason for ketubah, then if she doesn't have it, it will be easy for him to divorce her. In other words, so she knows that.
Anyway, that's the assumption. Okay.
I think, yeah. I mean, right, nowadays people may be less educated, because it's like nowadays maybe a woman knows if she's in California, she knows that California is a whatever it's called, a joint income state, or whatever the rules are. In other words, a woman, before she gets married, she knows the rules, what she's going to get if she gets divorced. That's an intelligent woman is concerned about that. She doesn't want to, she may never get married again, and then she wants to know what her financial circumstances will be.
But I would also say, I mean, I get the point, Masha. I mean, just with everything I said, I still get the point. That's why you have increased regulation, including the Cherem Rabbeinu Gershom, and you have increased regulation because how do you make it, and the charisma of a strong man against a woman who's not been educated? There's a lot of problems. I think the rabbis increasingly become aware of it, and the problems haven't ended. That's for sure.
But the main point is let's review what the main point is. The main point that Ron is saying is that from this Gemara of Rav Ami, it seems that you can be on Shabbos and be with your wife and about to consummate the marriage and yet not have a ketubah. So therefore, a ketubah doesn't have to be written before the chuppah.
Can I ask just one question here?
Yeah.
Is the idea supposed to be like, is what we're supposed to get out of this little excursus supposed to be that there's some comparison between the case where she's like not gonna agree, like even if they have yichud, she's not gonna agree to have sex with him because she knows that she doesn't have a ketubah, and therefore like will presumably encounter problems down the road. Is that supposed to be somehow comparable to the case where she's nida and like they also can't? Because that seems like a potential, right? Like there's some in each case there's like a strong reason not to have sex, but the assumption is that in the case where she doesn't have the ketubah yet, she's gonna refuse.
Listen, in both cases,
the part of me is like, I don't know. The other is an Easter card. That's like actually worse than like.
Well, in both cases, we're assuming they're not going to have relations. In the case of Nida,
we prohibit yichud for the Nida case, but not for this.
Right, because
I think it's like a worse consequence, I guess, is the idea.
Yeah, Kairos is between me and God, so we'll work out a deal. But my financial circumstances, I'm stuck.
I guess, right? I mean,
I'm not going to get any money.
Right.
I need to worry, Yeah. I think even nowadays people are more concerned about finances than Kairos. Shouldn't be that way, but I think they are. Okay, but in any case, but like I said, presumably she won't have relations in either case. But you're right. We prohibit the yichud in the first case. All right, but Yavni, can you explain this next piece of the Gemara? This next piece that of the Ran? Va'od.
Ve'od. Oh, that part. That's ואול דלא מתעשרה אלא משום דלא סמכה דעתה שהרי מתני בית דין יש לה. That's what I was thought meant, that was like following up on the previous, that the reason why she would be so nervous is because she's not confident in getting the basic ketubah even without the ketubah. But I'm open to
in other words, she won't. What is mitsara? She won't give herself over. Limsor from Lashon limsor.
Oh,
I think that's what it means. She won't give herself over only because she doesn't trust that Tanai Beit Din, I guess. She doesn't trust it. Lo samcha daita mit Tanai Beit Din. I guess that's what it means. So
I thought it was the lo mitzara, as in like it wasn't ushered, except for the fact that like the only reason it was made usher is because of this concern de lo samcha data.
What was not
the only reason it was made usher bia without ketubah.
Bia, I was concerned about this. What bia without ketubah?
Right. Oh, that's the one that was
forbidden,
a Rabbanan, was only forbidden.
Mishum de lo samcha. What did she not rely? What did she not trust then?
Because she can't trust because she wouldn't be that comfortable with it, because she wouldn't trust getting the ketubah, the basic ketubah that you get without a ketubah. In
other words, the yichud was not prohibited.
Right.
Only because I don't quite follow the logic.
No, the bia was prohibited only because of this concern that she might have.
Lexi, you have a...
Is that what you were saying, Lexi?
Sorry, my audio cut kind of in and out, so I did not catch all of that.
Well, how do you explain this? I don't tell us again. I was going back and forth 3 times whether mitasra means to give forbid or to give over, and so explain to me your way, Lexi.
Okay, again, my audio is cutting in and out. So 1 sec. No, I mean, like, I remember when we were reading this, we were a little confused, but as in, like, for me also, just I think the language of mitzvah, I've generally seen that as being related to language of Isser. So that was my automatic assumption. And especially since it's also following on this discussion where like the Isura Debia below Ktuba Midurabanam Ba'alma, et cetera, et cetera.
So you're saying the Isser of Bia without a Ketubah was not forbidden, except why?
Right. So like that, like it's only Midurabanam Ba'almahu, and then like she like also how do we translate like the Lo Tishma Lo Mifnei like she's not gonna like listen to him properly, or she's not gonna like take it seriously, essentially, because she knows. And I think that I read this as kind of like building on that previous statement, right? That like Delosam Khadata, that she's not essentially like really committing to this because she doesn't think he is, right? That without a ketubah, she knows how easy it is for him to divorce her. And so she, like Losam Khadata, she hasn't really kind of like.
But that's all a reason why you wouldn't forbid the Bia. Because why should you forbid it? Because she won't do it anyway. Anyway, whatever. It's not that important. It's not that important. I was a little bit fuzzy on this, and I'm
well, how are you reading that? How are you reading Shahare Mitanai Beit Din as building on that?
That she, I maybe the Tanai Beit Din is that she will get from the Beit Din the ketubah, but she's not trusting that, and therefore
that's right. I mean, that's it.
Therefore, she won't give herself over to the man in such a circumstance with them. There's no ketubah because she doesn't trust that the Beit Din will actually execute their responsibility. I mean, whatever.
It's a weak reason for being usher. Because,
either
because
way,
she doesn't have
it's like the
snichut
point.
dat, but the truth of the matter is she had Sinai Beit Din. But nonetheless, right? Nonetheless, I go with Letzi's reading. I think it works.
Yeah.
The other
Okay.
thing is, in general, when there's a general use of a term, that's a general use of the term. We didn't have that term. She's not going to hand herself over or whatever. We didn't have.
You're right. No, my first reading is forbid, but then I couldn't make sense of it. But okay,
Yeah.
I accept the reading.
Let's
go on.
You have to, after data, you have to put a semicolon. Asher would put a semicolon.
Colon.
Semicolon. Oh, colon or semicolon.
A semicolon, right, after surgery. Okay. Let's go on.
וכדאמרינן בפרק נערה שנתפתתה, הואיל וברשותו נכתבים משום דאור חדמילתא הוא לכתוב קודם כניסה לחופה. הילקח, אם תמצא לומר דחופה היינו ייחוד, כיוון דלא מתאסרה בייחוד בלא כתובה, שרי לכנסה לחופה.
Just explain the last part of this.
Sure, because if we say that chuppah is yichud, because we haven't forbidden, because if we say chuppah is yichud, then because we have allowed the chuppah to happen without ketubah, then we also allow the yichud to happen without a ketubah. No, I got that backwards, something like that.
Is he trying to say that basically you don't need a ketubah to have yichud? That's what it seems to me, at least.
Yeah,
right? Since we haven't made it also to have yichud without ketubah, you could also go into chuppah equal yichud, and since you don't need a ketubah to yichud, so you could also have chuppah without a ketubah. That makes sense.
Right. You don't need a ketubah to do yichud, so you also don't need a ketubah to do chuppah because they're the same thing.
Don't you have to continue with the comparison about Pirsa Nida?
Yeah, אבל פרסה נידה, כיוון שאסורה להתייחד.
Really, sir?
Yeah. היא חופה היינו ייחוד, לאו בת חופה היא. Whereas someone who is acknowledged to be in nida, then because she's like the yichud itself is asur, which we said is not the case for the lack of ketubah. If chuppah is yichud, then there's no chuppah if there's no possibility of yichud.
In other words, by no ketubah, really yichud, she is a bat chuppah,
right?
And therefore the chuppah will work. But when she's a nida, she's not a bat chuppah, so the chuppah won't. So the yichud won't work.
Right.
This is all that it is yichud. This is all that chuppah is yichud.
Right.
All right. So go on.
ומיהו בדיעבד מהנה דכיוון דעסיקנה בפרק הבא על יבמתו דיש חופה לפסולות כגון אלמנה לכהן גדול וחברותיה אף על גב דלא חזיין לעולם לביאה ולייחוד הנמי לא גרם מיניהו. But on the other hand, בדיעבד, because we say that b'diavad a chuppah that, like for example, married a kohen gadol to a almana, it happened b'diavad. It's legitimate, even though it's never permitted. The biyah will never be permitted to them, or yichud. Here too. So also with the nida, it's surely not worse than that.
In other words, he's saying that the Gemara in Yevamot, in Yevamot is saying that a forbidden Kohen relationship, the yichud is also forbidden, and yet that marriage works.
Right.
The chuppah works.
Right.
So therefore, b'di'evet, it must be the case that yichud with a nida would work.
Would work. Which is
not seen in the words of the Rambam, but it's not
right,
also,
and is
it's also
odd
not
for
rejected.
for all this language of lav bat chupahi, right? That makes it sound like it just doesn't. It's not a thing that would work, and this seems to go against that.
Exactly, he's bringing another Gemara that goes against that.
Right. Yeah, and the way he's getting out of it is saying one is b'diavad and one is lichatchila, but it seems like he was talking about b'diavad with b'diavad language.
Right.
אבל לכתחילה אין מכניסין אותה לחופה עד שתטהר.
So you should, ideally, you should obviously go to mikvah before your chuppah.
Before your chuppah. אי חופה היינו ייחוד, כמו שכתוב במקצת מקומות. And this is all assuming that we are accepting this idea that chuppah is ייחוד.
Right. So all that was that chuppah is yichud, and then he's done all of this work to prove that it would still work b'di'evet. Even if you hold that yichud is required and chuppah, that's the chuppah, it would still work for a nida. Okay. V'acherim
אומרים דחופה עליו היינו ייחוד, וראיה לדבר מדאמרינן לקמן, דאלמנה מן הנישואין, אין לה אלא מנה, אף על פי שעדים מעידים עליה שלא נסתרה ולא נבלעה, עלמה חופה עליו היינו ייחוד, אלא חופה היינו כל שהביא הבעל מבית אביה לביתו לשם נישואין. So we have another opinion that says chuppah is not yichud, and that comes from the proof that there's a Gemara that says a widow who is widowed after having done nisuin but not had yichud is considered a widow from marriage, not a widow from kiddushin, such that for the next marriage she would only get a maneh, unlike if she were a virgin, in which case she would get 200 instead of 100. And this proves that there must be a space in time that she has done nisuin and not done yichud, and therefore chuppah has to be something different from the yichud. And what is it? It's that the husband brings the wife into his house.
In other words, we found this case where she's married
and she hasn't,
and yet she hasn't had yichud, right? She's almana mina nisuin. She's almana. If you see this, she's almana mina nisuin. Afal pi she'edim aleha shelo nistara. What does nistara mean? It means she was not in a secret place with him, right? She was not hidden, concealed with him. Velo nivala, and she certainly didn't have relations with him. So that proves that chuppah is not yichud. Chuppah is not yichud because she has witnesses that she was never alone with him, and yet
they're married.
And yet they're married, fully married. And she's an almana from the nisuin. So you see that you don't need yichud.
So there's a tremendous desexualizing of the chuppah. In other words, chuppah becomes a ritual or a kinyan or location, a person. It's a marriage. Right.
We're about to read. What is chuppah then, according to this opinion? It's not yichud. Ella, go on.
I'm sorry.
Vialfinan, isn't that right? Ela chuppah hainu kol shehevi habal mibeit avia leveito leshem nisuin.
So that's it. That the Baal brings her out of his house into his out of her father's house into his house, but not stam, not just stam for having 5 o'clock tea, but l'shem nisuin.
But it is like 5 o'clock tea in the sense of that's what married people do, and it's all very proper and no warmth or heat in this.
Oh, that is true, right? In other words, it's just, actually, we're going to see that really a chuppah, or not, I don't know if we're going to see, but one idea about a chuppah is it's the actual, the procession. The procession itself is the chuppah. The procession from one house to the other. And even if you stop like midway in the procession, it's enough. You've already done some of the you did the chuppah. The chuppah is that procession.
So chuppah is basically a symbolic gesture. Like you just enter, like you just like leave for your father's house, go to his house for 2 minutes, say hi, bye, like whatever, bring your stuff, bring your luggage, and that's it. That's
I wouldn't yet say symbolic. If you saw the Gra, he pretty much says the symbolic, but we didn't yet see the word like I wouldn't yet go that far.
And that's what I would read from the text. So like, all you need is basically like take your luggage, bring it from her father's house to the
You're doing an act, but it's more than symbolic because you actually are bringing her into your house, and that's what it is to be married. It's setting up, it's living together in a house together.
That's the least.
That's why there's a minhag for the chassan to be kona, the spot of the chuppah, to actually make it into a house. The drushes all go, you're building a house together. But that minhag says he's Konez, so there'll be his house. He's bringing her into the house. And you're right about the procession, which I used to call the flower girl shita. You know, you go, the flowers are out, and that's the wedding.
So I mean, it is kind of symbolic. It is kind of symbolic, but the symbol is very close to the actual thing. The actual thing is living together in your house. So you're bringing her into your house. I mean, that's what marriage is.
Right, but that's the thing. Living together would be the yichud part, right? And it's even less machmir than the yichud.
No, but
so you don't need to do the actual living together. All you need to do is a symbol of living together.
No, bringing into your house is living together. Bring your house. No, symbolic would be something like this. Setting up a little gazebo with flowers and bringing her in there and pretending that and saying this is symbolic of bringing her into my house. It's not actually my house. It's just a gazebo in Central Park and I put flowers on it and I'm bringing her there as a symbol of bringing her into my house. And that's that is an opinion like that. Which is in my sources. But that I would call symbolic. This is not symbolic. This is not yet symbolic because, I mean, we're just playing with words here, but it's not really symbolic because it's actually your house and it actually from her house into your house. That's what marriage is all about. I mean, the Rambam, the first thing we learned, the first Rambam is in the old days before the Torah, you would bring her into your house. And all the Rambam said is that nowadays with the Torah, before you do that, you have to do Kedushin. But either way, you bring her into your house. That is the essence
the way I understood it is that it's symbolic of a yichud. That's what it is.
Oh, it's not symbolic of yichud. No. This is a totally different concept.
But that's the thing. Yichud is like, as Lexi was saying at the beginning, yichud is like kind of having this kind of marital experience together and just settling together, right? But in this case, it's just like symbolic of a yichud. Just move your stuff from one place to another, and that's it. That's considered enough for chuppah.
I think marriage has in it many aspects. One aspect of it is living together. One aspect of it is having sex together. One aspect is eating together. One aspect is being in public together as a couple. There are many aspects of marriage. And the question is, which one of those aspects is the essential one to create a marriage? You need all four of them? Do you need just one of them? And so Rambam is saying it's yichud, which is sort of leans towards sexual things. And here he's saying more just living together in a house together. In a house.
That's why, by the way, when a basin is working hard, am I on? When a basin is working hard to the case in which they never got a get, later on, okay? A couple never got a get. You're working hard. One thing you try to ask for and find, did they live together publicly, which means amongst Jews? If they lived in some far off, area which there are no Jews, that's not considered living together. I'm basing looks for that because one of the things is the knowledge of did they live together.
Maybe what Ruben is saying, or is instead of symbolic, maybe the word would be public, or like, maybe it's about the public versus the public knowledge versus the inner transformation of these two people.
Right. That I think that makes a lot of sense. And the idea of a lot of the stuff we're talking about is either like, how do these people relate to each other, but also like, how does the community they're a part of relate to them as a couple, especially since so much of what we talk about with marriage is also this idea of like, yeah, you're like miyached lo, and also you're usher to everybody else, right? This combination of like, what is your relationship to the other person and how does everybody else relate to you as now partnered with XYZ person, right? So both of those is crucial in like cementing this as being like between you, but as like separating you or distinguishing you within the larger community.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. This procession is witnessed by, by everybody. So it's definitely there to show. All right, let's go on. Let's just try to finish this. We were supposed to have a break, but I wanted to finish the Ran at least. So continue, Yavin, from V'yalfina.
V'yalfina lami dechtiv ve'im beit isha nadra. And demashma dechol zman shehi bebeit isha harei hi birshuto.
Right, this is talking about neders, that when a woman who makes a neder, her husband can nullify them. But it's only in beit isha, if she's in the house of her husband.
Right.
So therefore, you see that the idea of being in the house is what makes her the wife of the man. The house, being in the house, and not necessarily yichud, just being in the house. You could have guests there, but being in the house. By the way, I just want to point out, according to this idea, if the husband would, in the 1950s in America, the woman would pay for the whole wedding. But if the husband would pay for the whole wedding, and it would be he's renting the wedding hall, and it's his hall, then bringing her into the wedding hall, it's even though there's lots of thousands of people there, perhaps, that's bringing her into his house. And there's nothing to do with yichud here. It's just the idea that it's bringing her into his house.
וכי תימה פרסה נידה למה אינו מעלה לו למזונות, הרי בידו להכניסה לחופה. And so going back to the original reason why we said that yichud is, that chuppah is yichud, then we have to ask, if now chuppah isn't yichud, then why, if she is in nida, why shouldn't he be required to pay to supply her food?
In other words, she could they have a chuppah. Who cares that she's in nida? Bring her into the house. Nothing to do with yichud that's ra'ui for bia. It's just bringing in the house. So then how do you explain that, Gemara?
היינו טעמה שכיוון שאין חופה זו מסורה לביאה, לא חייבוהו חכמים לכנסה. And so this has to do with something about like when you have to do the nisuin, I guess, and because the biyah is still an important part of it, because this chuppah does not enable biyah, therefore the Chazal didn't require the chuppah to happen at that time, and therefore didn't require him to start providing for her.
Right. So, what does he mean in chuppah zu? There's two kinds of chuppahs.
Yeah, chuppah zu of someone who is in nida.
Kevan she'ein chuppah zu, this nida chuppah
doesn't
mesura lebia. She'ein chuppah zu, it is not mesura lebia. You can't have bia, yeah.
Therefore,
It didn't obligate him. The Chachamim didn't obligate him to bring her into his house. In other words, if she's a nida, then you shouldn't bring her into your house. Is that what he's saying?
No, yeah. I thought this must be connected to some concept of like when you have to do the nisuin after the erusin. But like that's where the Chachamim are being chayev. But I haven't, yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was just that like you're not obligated to bring her in immediately if you can't have sex with her. Instead, right, like there's some sort of mitzvah to like bring her into your house, like generally, but that like doesn't apply in a case where there's some other reason why you can't have sex with her.
Which I think relates to the like not this relates to the not providing her mizono, right? Essentially saying that like you don't have to make up for, like you don't have to feel bad or like pay back for the fact that you're delaying, you know, the proper chuppah bit, that actually you're not expected to do this and become like fully one household ever until you can have sex. And so it's like, that's why you're not obligated for mizono now if you haven't done that.
Right.
Right. Like he's not.
In other words, in other words, we're not going to force you to bring her into your house and then be obligated in mizonos when you are not able to have a full marriage here. Is that what you're saying?
So in what case does Chachamim obligate someone to bring her into the house? It's just the language itself.
When she's not a nida.
Okay, so in regular cases, like you're obligated to kind of like bring her into the house after the chuppah type of thing. No, sorry, not the chuppah. That would be like confusing. After the marriage ceremony, you're kind of obligated to bring her into your house to kind of formalize everything. However, when there is no like sexual potential, which kind of goes back to Rambam somehow, like Chachamim are not forcing you to do it.
Yeah, I think so. I think you said that right. Sounds right. Anyone have a comment about that? I think
this seems like it would lead you to believe that there is like a
sexual element.
Well, no, it's even stronger that there's like some affirmative reason to think that you like under non-nida circumstances that there is like an obligation to kind of consummate the marriage quickly. Right? Because it seems like there's a chiyuv here, which is like kind of that's pretty strong language, or at least I mean, there's a chiyuv to bring her into their house, your house, and that's strongly connected to sex. Like that gets that. I mean, there are people who read it that way, or not read this that way, but who like argue that line, and then then there are people who argue against it. But it just seems like this is sort of could lead you down that road.
It raises the question of when that chiyuv applies. Like if we could wait a year between kiddushin and nisuin, like when does that chiyuv appear?
Yeah, it's very interesting. It's I'm not sure. It's a good question.
I just think it's the ability to do something when it's permitted, but the chiyuv is about what's stated in the ketubah by shak sut v'ona. So I think the lashon is different specifically, but I don't think there's a chiyuv. I don't see the language of chiyuv by bia. I see the language of potential, but I don't think they're the same.
How do you understand v'lo chiyuvuhu chachamim lekansa?
Well, because the knisa is part of fulfilling the terms of the ketubah, no? In terms of providing for her. That from those positions, the man has a chiyuv to provide for his wife, but the hachamim are obligating him if she's unable to come in because she's an nidah. I just say I guess I see the difference between chuppah. A bia is not a chiyuv, but bia would create the necessity for a chiyuv.
Okay, very good. When I read it originally, I read kevan she'ein chuppah zu, this kind of chuppah. In other words, I was sort of reading that the Ran is saying that there's two kinds of chuppahs. One where there is yichud.
Are you pushing the?
And one of where there is yichud, and one where there isn't yichud, and there's just this second type of chuppah. And that this one, since it's not about Bia, then you don't have to do it. I don't know, but again, I don't know exactly what that means. You don't, what do you mean you don't have to do it? You don't have to do it in order to have sex? I'm not sure. Anyway, let's just finish to the end. Now that we do chuppah without yichud, like maybe like the Sfardim, we don't care if she's nida or not. It's for sure. But nevertheless, it's still better that she should be tahor. But we don't do yichud at all. We just do this second type of thing, which is bringing her into the house. V'ken nami mashma minhagan hi sheminhagan haya, and it seems like that was their behavior. Liktov k'tuba kodem knisa l'chuppah, to write the, just like the Bala Itter said, to write the ketubah before the chuppah. Kevan shelo shal Rabbi Ami haya, I think it should be, or im havia ketiva ketuba kishara lemiv'al b'tchila b'Shabbat. Because Rav Ami didn't say.
You're pushing so many buttons.
He didn't ask whether there was a ketubah at all. So it must have been that they assumed that there was always a ketubah, which is, of course, the way you could read the Gemara from the beginning. The whole reason that you could assume that of course there was a ketubah, that was already written on Thursday. Anyway, the main point of all of this is that the Ran is showing that you don't have to read the Gemara that it's yichud, but rather it's possible to read the Gemara that it's just, chuppah is just bringing her into your house. And that's the main point, really, of these Yesh Omrim. How the Ran actually holds, is not certain. Maybe he doesn't hold, maybe he's just bringing two opinions.
It seems to hold like a Charav Omrim, because he says at the end, it's basically he's like saying that the minhag has become that after the Charav Omrim.
Okay, I agree. Okay, good point. Good point. The minhag certainly is justified by the second opinion. Yeah. Okay, so let's take a break here, and we'll come back at let's say 10:40. Okay, so let's skip a little bit. I put in our source number 3 is just that ketubah is derabanan here, says the Ran, and the chuppah is deraita, says the Ritva. And then I just wanted to go here to this this Tosfot. This is another opinion about what a chuppah is. Who should read? Who would like to read? Anyone? Is
I can read.
you can read? All right, Lexi, go for it.
Where are we at?
We're at the.
Or where was that, Ruben?
Yeah, sorry.
You want to read, Ruben?
Oh, no, I was just asking where we're at.
We're at Yoma, Tosfot Yoma Yud Gimel Amud Bet.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Divrei Matchil Chad Amar La Amanat Shek. So
This
go ahead.
This is from the case, whatever. It's one of the cases where we talk about the designating the extra wife for the Kohen Gadol, and how that can work. Amar Rabbi Chanina.
So I skipped a little bit here just to make it shorter.
Amar Rabbi Chanina had Amarta Halin Dachansin Armalin Tzarich Lichonsan Mibod Yom So this quote from Yerushalmi that like somebody who's like having sex with or bringing in whatever is like a widowed
No,
wife.
I think just marrying. That doesn't just mean marry.
For me, I feel like they're often used interchangeably. I feel like a lot of the time lichnos does dafka mean also having sex, but you could read it either way here. Like who's marrying / bringing into his home / having sex with a widow as his wife needs to do it like before Shabbos begins. So he doesn't like acquire her on Shabbos. נראה לי לפרש בתולה שיש לה חופה מבעוד יום, משעה שנכנסה לחופה, קנאה לכל דבר, להכי מותר לבעליה בשבת. אבל אלמנה שאין לה חופה ואינה נקנית לבעלה ליורשה, לטמא לה ולהפר נדריה אלא על ידי ביאה, צריך לבוא עליה מבעוד יום. That's also why I think it's sex. Just from the phrasing we have here.
Why? I don't see. We're saying. Yeah, the way to marry a mana is to marry her through sexual relations. But that's
the word. So that's why I think like the kansin armelin tzarich lichonsan mibod yom. That's the same phrasing as when we then say like tzarich labo aleha mibod yom. That's language of sex. But
I think one is talking about the intent and one is talking about the way, the method. The concept. Yeah, that's not really that important.
In any case, it's explaining that a virgin like who has a chuppah besides this, who has some other kind of like public thing that's a chuppah, from the moment that she like enters the chuppah, she's been completely like acquired as his wife. And therefore you can like have sex with her in Shabbat and not have to be worried about like the kinyan aspect of things. But with an almanah, for whom the biyah is in fact the thing that like makes her fully his wife, in that case, that's why you need to have sex with her before Shabbos begins. ואפילו אם תמצא לומר שיש לאלמנה חופה קודם ביאה, נראה לי דייחוד שמתייחדת עמו היינו חופתה. וזה יש לעשות קודם השבת. Even if you're to say that like an almanah has something that you could call a chuppah, it would be at most like yichud. Basically, we're like, if you're going to say that there's like any kind of thing we'd call a chuppah for almanah, there's something that like makes her married besides literal sex, it's yichud. But there isn't some other kind of public thing, essentially.
Why would you, I mean, just for fun, why do you think that a almana doesn't have a chuppah?
I think part of it is like with a bitula who has like never been in relationship with another person, who people have only ever related to as like a single girl / woman, like this like public moment of like, yeah, she's like carried out in this litter as we're about to talk to you, and they're like, there's like this procession and whatever, is like this big part of like signaling kind of like a change in her status, and talking again about like sort of like the public aspect of this is a really big thing. Whereas like in almanah, somebody who's been married before, people have kind of already gotten used to the idea of her as somebody who is like in relationship to somebody else, as her as somebody who is not just like a betula. And so here it's more about the interpersonal relationship is like the main thing that's happening. Whereas with like a betula, it's also kind of like signaling to the community that there's this like shift in sort of her status and how they should relate to her.
And why? Very good. And why if there is a chuppah, it would be yichud. Why would it be yichud?
Because again, as we've been saying, that I think yichud is a lot more about their relationship with one another,
But
right?
what
That we
wouldn't
could
it
say,
be? And what wouldn't it be? It wouldn't be what the Ran just talked about, which is bringing her from her parents' house to the husband's house. And why wouldn't it be that?
well, because she's not necessarily in her parents' house.
Exactly, because she's not in her parents' house anymore. She's already
it could be the bringing her into his house, right? Like I think
that you could still have. That's
still also part
no,
of
but
like
it's also not so
interpersonal.
symbolic, because if she's got, she's an almana, she's got a house of her own. Who says you're going to go into the husband's house? Maybe you live in her house. There's no necessity of moving her location, whereas there was with the husband.
Right. And again, like when she's already been living independently, that kind of like symbolic public like transfer of where her base is less
just doesn't make
significant.
sense.
So it's more about like they're together and they're connecting with their relationship as like people who are now married, and like how do you relate to that shift in your status being alone together, having sex together, like right. But then the betula mishigetza b'hinuma havia chupa shela v'zahiru reglin lasot biyom aval lo hayu miachtin ela belayla semuch l'bia. So the betula would be carried out in this fancy litter, and that's like what her chuppah is. And this,
by the way, I looked this up. Himnuma in Jastro, that's where I got this a curtained litter on which the bride was carried out. But there are other I mean, the Rishonim didn't seem to understand it that way. Actually, the other people understood it differently. They understood it to be a veil, actually.
Right.
So have both of those in your head when you read it. Because it could be either. But
right. So either her being, but either way, it's kind of this sort of like procession-y public, like she goes out from her home either in some kind of litter or with like a
exactly. You still have the word sheyatzata, that she went out. She went out either in a veil or in a litter in some way. Right.
And so that's like her chuppah, and it happens during the day, but like they would do yichud at night, like around when the sex is going to happen. V'hashtaka amar b'Yerushalmi, halan dekansin armelin tzarich liakdan mibod yom, the yichud shela hainu chuppah. Right, so this is like where you say that when you're marrying a widow, you should do yichud with her before Shabbos begins, because the presumption, if we say that like yichud is her chuppah, even if they haven't dafka had sex before Shabbos begins, then she's been like niknet like before Shabbos begins, and so that would be fine. V'chein nira li yoter lamar dalmana nami itla chuppah kodem bia yesh lizaher b'may de b'rishu she'akones almana tzarich liachtan me'erev Shabbat achar berkat hanisuin. Okay, so he's like, and the author of this Tosafot is like, yeah, I think it makes sense to say that Nalmana does also have like a chuppah, but it's like, again, for her, it's just this yichud is what constitutes her chuppah. And it's like also we should be careful vis-a-vis essentially like you need to do yichud before Shabbos, and you need to also have done birchat hanisuin, presumably again like before the yichud, to essentially help indicate that like this is the nisuin, like this is the thing that's happening here.
It's interesting. Nowadays we do this yichud for everybody. So whether it's an almana or not, maybe this is the source for doing yichud. If chuppah is really enough to be like Tosfos says, this procession or maybe a veil, then we also do yichud, and we sort of create a ceremony that's works for everybody. Works for almana, works for betula. We don't see the distinction because we're going to have both. We're going to have this yichud also. But the main point of this Tosfos is that you see that there's such a thing as a chuppah that is a hinuma. And I actually have like pictures of it, like they would carry them on like a rickshaw kind of thing. Where can I show you this? I have it here. Wait a minute. Well, I don't find it quickly. But, you can imagine it. Poles, and then people carrying the poles, and she's sitting on a fancy seat. That's the idea. So we actually see so far 3 different types of opinions. We have yichud. We have the Ran said, bringing her into the house, And then we have this idea of it being the hinuma, which might be this litter. We have time for, yeah, let's do one more source. I never know. I give you two of them. The Orchot Chaim, he quotes the Bala Itter, and I give you also the Bala Itter. So it sort of makes more sense to see the Bala Itter, except that there's some discrepancies between the Girsa, a little bit different. Let's see the Bala Itter. Who has the energy to read that? We only have a few minutes. Josh, you want to try reading it?
Okay. וחופה היא שמוסר האב ומכניסה לבעלה לבית שיש בה חידוש, כגון אלו הסדינים, curtains, סביבות הכותלים.
Curtains, you read that as?
I think
here it says
in the Orchot Chaim, it's more of a summer.
Exactly, in the Orchot Chaim, it's better. Shikorim, curtains. I never thought it was curtains. Yeah, you're right. I don't think that's what it means though. Cortine.
I think it's curtains.
Good that you figured it out. It took me like 45 minutes of reading it again. I'm like, I speak French. I should understand what it is.
Definitely curtains. That's what they are.
It's definitely
Curtains for you.
Well, why would it be in plural? But
because it's curtains.
Sadinin, right? Sadinin.
Okay. All right. Here, and what about this one? Shikorin tlas. That and nobody figured out, I guess.
Trellis.
Maybe telas, like tela.
Like what?
Tela, a material, a drape.
Yeah. Tell us in Spanish.
Tela is
a talus?
Piece of
That's
cloth.
what it could be.
Cloth.
Like stuff.
Like stuff.
Yeah. Not stoff.
No.
Stuff in German, right?
Material in English.
Oh, in
Like
Dutch.
schmatte.
Yeah, stuff.
Stuff.
You know that? It's stuff. In Dutch, the word stuff means material. Stuffing. Okay, so fine. Sadin, we call curtains. So what are these curtains? Wait. So again, shemachnisim wait. Shehupa hi shemosera av umachnisim leba'ala lebayit. Not doesn't say to his house. Lebayit sheyesh bo chidush, to some building that has some special chidush. I think the way to translate chidush is decoration, something, a novelty about it. Kagon elo asadim, like in other words, like a gazebo or something that you, or a house that you, but a wedding hall that you decorate with curtains, savivo takotalim, around the walls. Go ahead.
ויש שעושים סוכה בוורד והדס כפי המנהג, ומתאחדים בה שניהם, והיא שקוראים תלמי בלעז. So there's some kind of garden.
Yeah, like you decorate, you have like, imagine like a wooden gazebo with like, with latchwork, and then in between the latchwork you weave flowers, something like that.
מה זה חופה? והאומר חופה היא הסודר שחופין ראשיהן בשעת הברכה, לאו מילתא.
Oh, what's this?
The cloth over their heads during the bracha, that's nothing. That doesn't mean anything.
He says there are those that what he says.
Yeah.
There is somebody who says that a chuppah is a sudar, is a kerchief or some kind of a decorative curtain or something. Shechofin rashehen, that they put over the heads of the people. Wait a second. I have a picture here. Here, you see this picture?
That's what we do in France.
We put a cloth over the heads of the chatan and the kala, in addition to what we would call a chuppah. In addition to this yiriot al gabe klonsot, the poles with a covering. That's what you do in
Islamic
France?
tradition, you do that with the talis. Like you
Yeah.
cover both the khatan and the kal with the
So
talis.
the
to get it
Sephardim,
on
right, the
chuppah.
Sephardim use the talis to put, some Sephardim, not all. Many Sephardim in Israel, most Sephardim in Israel, the Chatan wears a talis and that's it. But yeah, you're familiar, Ruben, with putting a talis over the head of the kala?
I think that's how I did it in my wedding. I think the Messianic tradition was like you have to take the talis and put it over both of you.
So
Yeah,
that's
we did that the Spanish and Portuguese as well.
So this is this. So here you with both, with also the chuppah, also with what we would call a chuppah, I should say. Okay, so he says ha'omer chuppah hi asudar shechofin v'shehen b'shas habracha lav milta is nothing. It's not true. Go ahead.
מתגרסינן בסוכה וליחדו בחופה ולכלי בסוכה אין שמחה אלא בחופה. I don't understand what they're proving from the sukkah.
I think he's saying that that it's a place that you go into. It's got to be it's got to be like a sukkah. It's not a cloth. It's a sukkah. And to go into the sukkah, and there's no simcha except in the sukkah. So it's like something you're going into, and it can't be a cloth. You don't go into a cloth. I think that's what he's saying.
Or that it's like a place that you could also do, essentially be like enclosed in or do yichud in. Like you can't do that with like a little cloth you hold over people's heads.
Mm-hmm.
אין שמחה אלא בחופה.
Sukkah doesn't have that, So in other words, it's the most minimal place, but still a place. Most minimal place, but still a place.
גרסינן בירושלמי עד שתכנוס לחופה. לא סוף דבר לחופה, אבל לבית שיש בו חופה. שמע מינה מקום מיוחד, כאין קהילה שיושבין ביניהם, השושבינים.
Oh, so wait a second. So now he's saying it's first he said it's this place that you decorate. Then he said it's not the cloth that you put on. Even though I should just point out at this time that there are many opinions that say no, the cloth is the chuppah, and the thing on the poles is nothing, and it's really the cloth that's the chuppah. So, but Baal Iter is saying the opposite. He's saying that the cloth is nothing, and either it's the vradim, or what is the second thing he's saying? Bayit, aval lebayit sheyesh bo chuppah shma mina makom miyuchad ke'ein kila. What is a kila?
Like a bed canopy.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's got some kind of canopy. Sheyoshvim benehem hashushvinin. That the guests, shushbinim are actually the technical term for shushbinim nowadays is the two people who escort the chatan and the kala. But it may also mean in general guests. So it's the guests are there and also the chatan. In other words, it's like the dais, what you would call, the table where important people are sitting, maybe.
והם הנשואים והחיתניה בעוול רבתי עושים חופה לחתנים וכלות ותולים בהם אחד דבר שהביאו אוכל נפש ואחד שלא הביאו אוכל נפש. דברי רבי מאיר, וחכמים אומרים אין תולים אלא דברים שלא הביאו אוכל נפש. ואלו דברים שתולים בהם, אגוזים שלא הביאו אוכל, ורימונים שלא הביאו אוכל, ולשונות של הארגמן וכו'.
In other words, what kinds of decorations should you have? You should have maybe food or maybe just wool. Okay. Klalo shel davar.
Are they talking about like a Chag or Chol HaMoed or something?
I think what he's saying is what type of decorations to have on the chuppah. And you're right. Ochel nefesh has to do with Chag usually.
Yeah.
But I think he's using that same term to talk about whether the decoration should be foodstuffs or not foodstuffs.
כללו של דבר, כל דבר שתולים בחופה אסור בהנאה. Okay?
It's muktzah. It's like a sukkah. And the things that you hang on the sukkah or decorations you can't eat.
Can't eat the grapes.
Exactly. So it's got a similar din.
בגרסינן בירושלמי בפרק ג' בסוכה, אלו הן חופת חתנים, סדינין המצוירין ושערוני זהב, תולין בהם, אף על פי שמנהג הקהילה אינו אלא לבתולה. באלמנה נמי, כיוון שנכנסה לשם נישואין.
לשם.
נכנסה לשם.
Oh no, sorry, לשם, you're right, לשם. כיוון שנכנסה לשם נישואין, יש בו מקום מיוחד.
והצעת המיטה להתייחד שניהם, הרי הוא כבית שיש בו חופה.
So in other words, he's saying that you have this decorated place, and you can have either a betula or an almana. Since they're going there for the purpose of marriage, it's called a chuppah. Right. So it's almost like the tent.
It was to decorated sheets and golden.
Yeah, but for an almana, just needs to be a bed.
No decorations for the widow.
Poor lady. Right. You have to you have to set up a bed.
ועל זה שנינו בתולה נישאת ליום הרביעי ואלמנה ליום חמישי, שפעמים בשבת בית דין יושבים בעיירות. שפעמיים בשבת בית דין יושבים בעיירות. And that's connected to betula being wedded on Wednesday, right. In order to have the possibility of going to the Beit Din on Thursday.
Right. So what do we see from this? This is this other opinion. Basically, we have this idea of the Vradim. Also, we see two main ideas here.
Like a yichud room, right?
Well, no, the Shushbinin are there. It's some kind of structure where you have the shush, where you have guests and the kala. And here, this is where I would use the word symbolic. Here, it's like a place that's made for the purpose of marriage. So it's not like you're actually bringing her into your house or you're actually having yichud with her. You're doing something that's really, in the real world, nothing. It's useless. You're going to throw this thing away afterward. It has no real significance, but it has significance because you give it significance, because it's l'shem nisuin. Kevan shenichnasa l'shem nisuin, it works. And so therefore it has to have, so therefore all it needs to have is some special indication that it is for that purpose. So that's the decorations. It's either a gazebo or it's a bed with decorations around the side. It's someplace, but it's not yichud at all because the shushbinin are there. And the second point is that he rejects the idea of the cloth over the heads being something. So that's the sheet of the Bala Itter. So like I said, there's many opinions. We saw Yichud, we saw the Ran brought the Yesh Omrim, or that it's not Yichud, but it's what was it?
Bringing her inside the house, I think.
Right. It's the actual bringing into the house of the Chatan. The actual house of the Chatan. And then we saw the Tosfot that said it's like this procession carrying her in the Hinuma. And the Bala Itter seems to say it's not the procession, but it's a special place designed for it. And that's actually kind of very close to what we do, maybe identical to what we do. We have, we don't maybe have drapes on the side, but we do have a cloth on top of a chuppah.
So Rav Nachum, I don't know if you've ever been to a Sephardi henna, like especially Moroccans. We usually bring like the bride and the groom on like kind of a platter.
Oh,
Yeah, let me just, that's my hand. I don't know if you can see the picture. Like we carried on like kind of almost platter. It's carried by people that just carry it around. So I don't know. I'm just wondering if that's like a zecher to like the Inuma or something.
Yeah, it probably is. Well, to the Himnuma, yeah, it probably is. The carrying, it's it's a general symbol of kavod to carry somebody around, right? You're showing him that he's like higher up than me. I actually have I have this book that I called, very interesting book. It's called, I don't know if you see, Sharshei Minhag Ashkenaz. And he has in it like 150 pages on the customs of how to do a chuppah. And he argues very strongly in favor of the cloth over the heads of people. And he also has a picture of this procession. And he seems to claim at the end of his essay that the chuppah that we carry on two poles was originally a mobile structure for escorting the chatan and the kala to the chuppah, to the place of the chuppah. And then they would have four people holding poles with a canopy, and they would walk with the one with the chatan and one with the kala, or maybe them together. And they would get there, and then they would discard, or they would push aside that canopy, and then put a talus or something, over the heads of them, and that would be the chuppah. And then he says that as time progressed, people stopped throwing away the thing and just kept it there, and then they got rid of the procession entirely. And then they just have the four poles.
Who says this?
This is, I'll tell you his name just a minute. Benjamin Shlomo Hamburger.
Yeah, sounds like a Jewish man.
Yeah, this is a very interesting book called Sharshei Minhag Ashkenaz. He writes like these.
But it makes sense. It was a pelican. It's a very interesting shita. You have Sarah here, by the way.
Yeah, just there is an Italian and I think also French custom from like the late Middle Ages of parading through the town with the bride's like essentially like dowry, including these like cloths.
What, a non-Jewish custom you're talking?
Yeah, no, like a Christian custom.
Yeah.
And I kind of wonder whether some of the resistance to like, it's not cloths over their head. Here, I'm pasting a picture from like 15th century Italy. Is like actually about that. And that like, it might be, I don't know. This is like wild conjecture.
Wait, show me the picture.
I think if it's in the chat, I think you should be able to open it.
I'll show you. I have more pictures. Yeah. Wait, I don't want to. There's a picture of. I sent you just two. But he also has in his book a picture of people getting married, where the chuppah, what we would call the chuppah, is like in the background, but not over the, and what's over them is the talus. And he's Hamburger. He's from the German. He's from the Yekis, and he says that in New York, in the Jewish Yeki community in Washington Heights, they still do this covering with a talus. Here, I want to show you this picture, right? Actually, can you see this picture if I hold this up?
Mm-hmm.
You see that?
Yeah, a little closer.
This bottom one here. You see what this is? These are rabbis here with a chuppah on top of them, going to see the Pope, who's also got a chuppah over him, and he's on a horse. So his poles
There's a Jewish joke there somewhere, but I don't have it.
No, but the idea he's trying to show from this picture is that it was a general custom of having these four poles with a roof over it to show kavod for a certain person. And then,
so it's like a palanquin. It's an equivalent. Yeah.
Oh, here's the hinuma. I don't know if you see this. A whole little house to carry.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So there's definitely been a lot of evolution in what we do. Certainly from the times of the Rambam where it was just yichud. All right, we'll stop here and we'll have to continue next week with a few more opinions.
Yes, Kayach, thank you.
Sure.
Yeah.